Welcome. You're listening to Parts and Charts, the IFS and Astrology podcast. I'm Chelsea Owens, an artist and licensed marriage and family therapist specializing in internal family systems, and one of my spiritual gifts is the ability to balance depth and fun.
And I'm KP Kaszabowski, a poet, filmmaker, and astrologer who seeks pathways to fully loving myself and others, and the language for what is happening underneath the surface.
Together, we explore how inner parts and planetary archetypes speak to one another. Whether you're new to IFS or astrology or deep in your own integration practice, we're glad you're here. I'm excited to get into more of the meat of what we're doing here, and yeah, just discover some new things. I feel, unsure of what even is going to be discovered right now, so that feels exciting. So you want to start with no bad parts, no bad charts?
Yeah, I mean, the perfect way to put that. So who wrote the book? Is it book? No Bad
Yeah,
Charts.
yeah. So Dick Schwartz's newest book. Well, he might even have a newer one since then. Or I think there's a workbook that goes along with No Bad Parts. And that book, I've seen it like in so many places. It's like really out there in the mainstream. Um, and beautiful book. It's really digestible for like the lay people, the people who, aren't therapists, because there's definitely tons of IFS books that are, for clinicians and for anyone, but like tailored to clinicians who are practicing IFS. But this one feels really easy for, I think, just like everyone to read, learn a little bit about IFS, some exercises to apply it to your own life. But so the title is No Bad Parts. And that's kind of the saying, all parts are welcome is kind of the IFS motto. Um, Meaning that, yeah, there's no bad parts. And a lot of people do come to therapy often because they don't like something,
Right.
because they want something to change. And I think that's kind of the revolutionary idea that IFS um, is bringing to the surface about um, working with, being with the parts, or the feelings or memories, thoughts, traumas that people have that maybe seem destructive or
Yeah.
seem ill-intentioned even. And we discover like it actually isn't, it actually is something that has developed over time for our survival, for our
Mhm.
protection. And the more, digging we do, we find out like, yeah, like a lot of these parts just want us to be okay. And they do it in a lot of different ways that can sometimes look mean or destructive, or something that people don't like, or something that society doesn't like.
Yeah.
And really just come to it with curiosity and compassion and all the C words, to just get to know it and eventually heal it. But it seems like a totally different paradigm to other therapies, to, like just what we've learned so far in psychology. And yeah, we're not like killing off these parts. Um, yeah, we're just befriending them, getting to know them, healing them.
I so connect to that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tangents I want to go on, but I'll keep them from other episodes. But what has felt true for me in my life is that when I try to cut something out or like full stop something or whatever, it just like becomes like a hydra. Like you cut one head off and it's like 10 more heads later kind of situation. But when I approach parts of myself or parts of my life as a friend or just like a genuinely curious person who doesn't know that being yet, um, things soften and release on their own. Um, yeah, so I very much connect to that philosophy, and connecting that to astrology as well. Is like I see a lot of clients who already know a lot about certain placements, and they may have read or been told that that placement is like where the moon hates to be, or they're doomed to like breakup after breakup after breakup because maybe there's like a Mars situation going on in their birth chart, and there's like this like immediate like they've claimed a badness or a shame to it. So then it's like almost impossible to see the benefit or even the neutral parts of like what that placement could do for them. Um, so that's like one of my like I do it as gently as I can, but that's one of my like flags. Like if I hear any negative or exiling kind of discussion of a placement that someone has in their own chart or in a partner's chart or something like that, I stop the session and be like, no, like let's talk about it this way. Like I either like do a gas up, like it's like pep rally moment, which depends on how they're talking about it because like maybe they really have no capability of seeing any positive like side effect or effect of this placement, so they do need a pep rally, or maybe they don't need a pep rally, they just need to see the possibility in like reducing the charge, the negative charge of how they're seeing that part of them.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a really big part of my practice. And also is hard for me when I have a Mars ruled Venus and a Venus ruled Mars. And in if you're looking online, you're typing that in, it looks like I'm doomed to like never
Oh.
have a satisfying relationship or whatever. Like there's so many negative things that those placements can say, can like indicate. Um, but I know it's true about my life, and I love looking for the opportunity of like going deeper or finding a richness in what like it is obvious that those placements cause friction or like some kind of non-harmonious or not so easy experience, I would say.
Mhm.
Um, but I really like how my life is shaping because certain parts of them are not like this life is not easy. Um,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
yeah,
And as we know, you have a lot of beautiful friendships and a
yes,
beautiful relationship with your partner
yeah,
that it's flourishing and long
yeah,
lasting.
yeah. I mean, that's something to point out. I mean, there's a lot of like ancient astrology techniques that we can get into about my own chart that do say that there's a little bit of like the gods are smiling on me that I very much appreciate.
Mhm.
Even with my Mars ruled Venus, there's like some special things happening too. And well, maybe we can talk about that in a different episode because that's like going into like 2000 years ago, this philosopher developed a technique kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm wondering if that is connecting to IFS for you, like how you approach talking with your clients.
Mm. Yeah, talking with clients. Wait, say more.
Yeah,
I'm
like
trying to.
how both the two things I'm curious about right now is like people coming to you with how they talk about their own parts, whether they know it's a part or not, and then
Yeah.
maybe like how they talk about the God smiling on them and
Mm.
and is there like how do you connect those kind of ideas to IFS?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question because I there's a lot of people that come to me who already know about IFS and they're coming to me for that. They want IFS therapy. And so they have varying degrees of what they already know or what they have, read about or experienced in IFS therapy. So there's those folks and they have the language already. And then there's the folks who don't know much about it. And yeah, I think every clinician does it differently. Some people like to give a lot of information, like this is how I practice, and do a little bit of psycho ed about IFS and what it's like and what we do. And I've kind of done it both ways, but I don't honestly like to give too much information. I think when people come in and they're like, I don't like this thing, or I don't like that I do this, or those are all just like things I'm marking, like I'm just noting this. They're all trailheads. They're all going to be places that we're going to
Yeah.
go to. So I won't, argue with someone like, oh, I don't like this thing. And I'm not going to, argue with that because that's just another part that's expressing that they don't like what's going on or they don't like this other part. So it's all just like more parts to work with and more trailheads for
Mm.
us to discover. And Yeah, so I don't do a ton of explaining. If I feel like it's necessary or the client really needs that, I will. If they have parts that are really needing um more kind of, I don't know, structure or theory, I'll go there if it feels necessary. But I don't usually like start at that point, like with
Yeah.
like here's the model and this is what we're gonna do. Here's what it's gonna look like. Because that can honestly bring up like intellectual parts or thinking parts that want to get it right.
Hmm.
And like then those parts kind of come to therapy and try to do it all right and which is fine. It's just another part to work with. But yeah, sometimes giving too much information can bring up a lot of thinking parts and it becomes a really cerebral process.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
there's also like thinking like protective thinking parts who really they need to know like they won't even let us go forward with any of the work until they know like what the F are we doing here? Like
Yeah.
I'm starting this therapy journey. I don't feel safe. Like we need to know the roadmap. We need to know who you are, what the goal is. Like they really need a lot of info and I totally get that. And
Yeah.
um hearing like the fears and what they're needing, like really hearing that and giving content if I need to, but not necessarily worried about the content of what that part is like totally needing or yeah, fearful of happening, but just really being with the feelings of what it's feeling. Yeah.
That's so interesting. First of all, trailhead is like the perfect word. Like as a practitioner too, like, oh, I'm noticing this. We may not be approaching that yet, but that is a path we could take soon that could be helpful. Like that, it's a really great word for me to hear.
Yeah, that's like the IFS term for
Okay,
like
cool.
you're kind of listening for these things. You're
Yeah,
listening like when someone says like I don't like that or I don't like that I do this. Those
yeah,
are all just like a trailhead where it's just another path to some parts or a part. Yeah.
yeah. This is making me curious about like when a client comes to you and they're giving you these trailheads that you may not feel like it's time to explore. Is there a moment where you're like, okay, let's focus on like your strength, your sun, your like what about you or what part of you brings you confidence before maybe tackling is not a good word, but approaching a part that is a problem. I'm using air quotes, by the way, problem. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, you're just working with whatever's coming in. Like whatever part is presenting itself. And I think maybe in that question you're wondering if I'm coming in with an agenda or if the
yeah,
client's coming in with an agenda. And my answer is no. I can have
mhm,
an idea of like, where we want to go or where I want to go, but it's not like ultimately up to me. Um, and if I'm noticing in myself that I want to go to a certain place or I want to go to a certain part, I'm just noticing that and I'm um, kind of reflecting if there's a part of me that's coming up that really
yeah,
wants that. And there for sure always is. And so I just have to unblend myself from that and notice, okay, like yeah, there's a part of me here that really wants the client to feel this or not feel that or heal that or not. It's so I'm
yeah,
just noticing that inside, like getting some space from that inside of me. And then noticing if the client is also like expressing some kind of agenda or if there's a part of them that has an agenda, is really agenda driven and wants to go to a certain part or not go to a certain part. So you're just working with that uh whatever's there. There's no like right or wrong answer to what you're going to work with and what's
yeah,
showing up. You're just being with whatever is there in the moment.
yeah. Okay. I think it's so good that you bring up the like making sure you're unblending from
Yeah.
like the releasing any desire for force or
Yeah.
like undue guidance. Yeah, that's important.
Hmm.
Um, so then maybe my another side of that question is, are there parts of ourselves that are inherently good or pleasurable or exciting or like positive attributes only, I
Mm.
guess.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd use good. But I get the essence of like what you're
Yeah.
asking. Pleasurable. Yeah, yeah, who hold all of those qualities. Sure. Yeah. And without like getting too far deep into like what happens in the whole IFS process when you like kind of go through the whole model and get to the unburdening process. So basically, the kind of high level goal is to uh, uh, help some of the extreme parts who have these extreme beliefs, extreme burdens, to give them some relief, to heal them, unburden them, so that they can get freed up to do something else if they want. So they bring in other qualities. So like there can be unburdened parts in the system, who you've healed and or who have healed themselves, and they can bring in all these other qualities. So they just then become parts of the system, and they could, yeah, experience pleasure, or like, just be creative or make art, and they're not in an extreme role where they're
Yeah.
so fearful of, something terrible happening to you, happening to the client. Um, so they could be doing all these other things and have like those like kind of quote unquote positive
Yeah.
um qualities that they bring in. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really like how you're phrasing this because when in a birth chart, like if there's just a really happy sun, like a sun in Leo, or a sun in Aries, like a very happy sun, and like there's like only like the sun's in conversation with like let's say Venus, the planet of
Mhm.
love and pleasure and connection, and like let's say another planet that's like known for these really positive things.
Mhm.
It can look very, it can, these planets in conversation or just the sun itself can feel really great. But
Mm.
at certain moments in one's life, that planet may be responding to something or highlighting something in them that feels more tender or bring up fear, but in a different way. Like the
Mm.
sun is maybe not necessarily an indicator of fear in your chart,
Yeah.
but at certain points in your life, it may be connected to maybe like Pluto or Mars or something. And there's something about the sun energy that all of us have of like, who am I? What am I doing here on this planet? Like that kind of thing
Mhm.
that can turn pretty quickly into like, well, I'm worthless or I lack what I want in this lifetime or like those things. So th those are like the extremes, and then in the middle is like, well, maybe my vitality feels a little low, or maybe it feels okay, but not great, right? So it's like it, it always requires this level of patience or listening, maybe a little bit of anticipation, a little bit of reflection, in order to sense the great nuance of everything, right?
Mhm.
So like if you like you're saying the unburdened parts can show up as like really creative and make art, in that moment in time, they look like they're blessings. But then
Mhm.
maybe 4 years ago or 4 years ahead, that part maybe asking for something that yourself or other parts are not okay with anymore. Something like that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing, and that's a connection I'm making between our practices.
Yeah. Yeah. And and this may not be directly correlating to sun sign, but I really view, and especially with IFS, I really view the self, or the big, capital S self that we talk about, um, kind of like the sun. And, it's like this really magical, beautiful, ineffable quality that we have that, is never going away. It's always there, even though you can't always
Yeah.
see it, right? It's like things cover it up. Um, just like, yeah, I guess just like in the chart too, right? Like that core essence of who you are, like it's always there. It's always like something you can tap into.
Yeah.
Even if other things are transiting and covering things up and illuminated at certain points or not.
Yeah. Maybe it's helpful to talk about our charts because we do have something in common that
Yeah.
is connected to that. We both have Mars combust. When Mars is within a certain amount of degrees or close enough to the sun's like power like exacerbates maybe too negative of a word, but enhances the
Mhm.
power of Mars. And that
Mm.
both of us have that.
That's what combust means. It's
Basically, every other planet can be combust when it's a certain amount of degrees away from your sun or the sun. So I wonder if that looks like Mars is like motivation, passion, energy, like the principle of severing. So like this is who I am, this is who you are, and we're separate. Like that kind of like needing to be different or identifying what is not you. So I wonder if we can think about how that placement in a chart is like a blending of the self and a part of us that like has a harder time separating because they're so
yeah,
close to each other. Maybe that's
yeah.
something to put a pin in, but like that
Yeah.
could be something.
Yeah. And yeah, sometimes people call that or a part that even has a lot of access to self or kind of like looks like self sometimes, self-like part.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's really interesting. Um,
So
I'd be, yeah, and yeah,
because
I'd be interested in seeing more about what the connection is there.
yeah,
Hmm.
because you have more experience with your parts, maybe I can ask you some questions.
Sure.
So, what question to ask? Do you have a part that has lots of access to yourself that you are aware of right now,
Hmm.
or a few?
Yeah, I think like therapist parts have a
Okay.
lot of the self. Um, like like a part that and yeah, maybe it's speaking right now, like that kind of knows what to say or can articulate things and
Mhm.
but definitely, kind of has an agenda too, like wants me to speak well or wants me to
Yeah.
be received well or wants to, have really clear information or say the right thing or really, know a lot about what I'm talking about or seem like I know what I'm talking about.
Okay. That's interesting because Mercury's in your first house.
Yeah.
But that's not related to Sun. So what's interesting about you and I is that we both have Mars can like right next to our sun. I have three planets in my first house. You have one planet in your first house. First house is sometimes talked about as the self or like the life, the helm, like who's steering the ship. So maybe that is the self more than the sun. I don't know. We can keep talking about this and like proving our hypothesis. But what you were saying is that the part of yourself that is closest, like has more access to yourself, is the person who can articulate or the
Hmm.
being, the part that can articulate yourself's wishes and like wants to be like a
Hmm.
consummate speaker, convey
Yeah.
the right information. That's
Yeah.
interesting because I have Mercury conjunct my sun as well. You don't. Yours is in your
Oh.
first house.
Mm.
And I have a harder time articulating what I actually think. Like I feel like I have to think much longer than other people, and I tend to convey my ideas or myself better when I'm typing rather than speaking.
Mhm.
But the three planets in my first house, which is Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn. Uranus and Neptune are modern planets, so I'll just stick to Saturn.
Yeah.
I do feel like my more strategic part, if I'm going to say that, so Saturn, or the one who can like think really, really long term, or like make something out of nothing, like that kind of magician energy, is
Yeah.
the part of myself that has most access to myself.
Mm.
Um, so I wonder if we can look at the first house in a different episode and talk
Mhm.
about like self act like you call it accessing the self.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll say the most access to self or a lot of
Yeah.
access to self.
That's
Um,
interesting. Okay, we're back from the break. Since we were talking about birth charts, I thought it'd be helpful to talk about like what a birth chart is and how we use the information, how we talk about it. Okay, so the birth chart is, it can be not in a circle. Some places put them in like table charts basically, but the birth chart is circular because it's mapping where the planets and asteroids and other different types of placements are in the sky at any moment. And a birth chart is like it's snapped. It's the map is created from the moment that you are like your first breath, the whatever the doctor or whoever said was the first minute you were born, and that creates the horizon line on the chart. So that's like the horizontal line in the middle of the circle. The top of the chart are the planets in the day, and the on the bottom of the chart is what's underneath us or like in the night part as like how the southern hemisphere is experiencing a different part of day than we are, that kind of thing. Or the yeah, that kind
Oh, I
of
didn't
information.
know that. New information I'm even learning.
Yeah. So like if someone was born, let's say like 2 days after you, the sun would be in a slightly different spot. If you're born when the sun was in Cancer and then 2 days later the sun turns into Leo, then the sun would be in the Leo part of your chart if you were born that day. Is probably
Okay.
the best way to explain that. You can cast a chart for not a birthday. You can cast a chart for the moment something happened. Um, there's a birth chart. There's some debate, but there's a birth chart for the United States of America. There's a birth chart for John Deere Tractor Company, that kind of thing. But for our podcast, we will be looking at basically just birth charts of human beings that are ourselves or human beings that are famous so that we have enough information about them that we can actually like talk about the placements so that we have like this shared language. I usually don't like to talk about celebrities' charts or famous people's charts because we don't actually know what's happening inside of their internal experience. But it can be helpful when you're studying the archetypal kind of like indicators as a practice, right? What I like about IFS is that it is more of a conversation or it's more of an exploration and less of a like data points and analyzing what must be true or what could be true. It's more of like what are you actually sensing and feeling and how can you have a conversation with these parts. So, did
Yeah,
I
and
say
then you want to
everything?
say more about kind of what the thing looks like too, like describe that. If you're just, totally new to this and you're looking at the
Yeah.
chart and like it to me looks like math that is really difficult to understand. Yeah,
Yeah.
so if you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. So it looks like geometry, and it's the
Mhm.
only geometry that I can fathom. Um, okay, so we have Chelsea's chart up here. Chelsea's sun is the circle with the dot in the middle, is in Cancer. And
Mhm.
Cancer is like the two little circles with the lines. They look like fish. Um, yeah, they whatever. They look like this.
69. It's
69.
you're real. It's 69.
Yes, let's be real.
It's the
Yeah, so the sun is it changes a degree every single day. So if we think about the month, it's typically 30 days long. So the sun is in each zodiac sign for about 30 days. There can be a little bit of imperfection there with the numbers. So if you're born on the first day of Cancer, your degree is either 0 or 1 degrees, that kind of thing. We also see that her moon, that like crescent shape, really close to her sun on her chart, is in Leo. So if she was born maybe even like 6 hours before, the moon would have been in Cancer because the moon moves around this circle in 28 days. So every two-ish, 2.5 days, the moon changes signs.
Mhm.
So in about 2 days, the moon was then in Virgo from Chelsea's birthday. Um, yeah, what else should I say about the birth chart?
Yeah. And if you don't have your birth time, you could still get a lot of aspects of your chart minus the rising or the ascendant, right?
Yeah, if you don't have your birth time, yeah, there's still a lot of information. What the birth time gives us, though, is where the planets are placed in relation um, to the time you were born, and then we know where your houses are. So, Chelsea's sun is in her 12th house. That the 12th house gives me a lot of information about how her sun, her life force, is experienced in her life. Having the moon in the first house also gives me a lot of information. Where if you don't have your birth time, the information I get is she has a sun in Cancer and a Leo moon, um, and they're making aspects to other planets in her chart. So there's still a lot of like applying it to IFS. It looks like you can still see what conversations are being had between the parts, but you may not have the information of like what parts of your life or like areas of your experience are being impacted or influenced by those placements. So it's so much more juicier to me to have the house placements or the house information. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if you're looking at the chart, it's important to know the symbols. There's all the symbols that you can memorize about the planets, and then there's the houses, the 12 houses also, where all of these things are sitting in. And sometimes there's nothing in a house, but that still means that there's something going on in that house for you.
So even if there isn't a placement in a house of your chart, there's like and layers beyond layers of information you can get about that area of your life.
Yeah.
Um, there's just not like a player, like a an actor, I guess, in that place in your chart at that moment. But that's good
Yeah.
that you bring that up because we did want to talk about how this is your birth chart, but where the planets are currently in the sky are lighting up different areas of your house, like your chart,
Mm.
at any given moment. Like actually, a couple hours ago, Venus just moved from Pisces into Aries.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
then we can think about like what is Venus doing in that part of your life as opposed to yesterday, and like maybe you can feel the shift, maybe you can't. Maybe it's a tool for contemplation. That's like up to you. Um, yeah. So it's like it's always animated, it's always moving.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool to think about, or for myself, how all of the aspects, like you said, Venus moving into Aries, how this is connected to parts of me that could be impacted right now that uh, I'm not even aware of at this moment, but I'm sure there's something that gets impacted or just, yeah, maybe struggles with something or is just learning something new in each of these different transits
Yeah.
through, yeah, through time. And so I can't wait to just keep making those connections, but that's like bubbling up for me right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that the sun is very important in your chart because the sun rules your ascendant.
Yeah.
So whenever the sun changes signs, I would posit that you would feel that shift more than other people who don't have like such a self connection to the sun energy.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So every change of the zodiac, basically, of every sign. Um,
When the sun moves through the signs, yeah. Or if
Mhm.
there's like something happening with the sun, like maybe there's a planet talking to the sun directly, kind of thing. And I say
Mhm.
talking to the word, the astrological word is aspect.
Yeah.
But it's helpful for me to say like they're in conversation
Yeah.
because it relieves the negative or positive connotations, which is better for me.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Mhm.
So I think that you said earlier that you had a connection to how astrologers use the data and like present the data, right?
Yeah. So, well, yeah, typically, yeah, so the birth chart information, it feels like this snapshot that's ever changing. And one tool that I use sometimes with clients or that you can even, use on your own to map out your parts is just making a parts map. And it helps me with my own parts and with clients' parts when there's just a lot that you're noticing. Uh, even in a session, let's say, there could be so many parts popping up here and there, that it's like, whoa, okay, we've got so much here. We need to kind of take a step back and just like look at this landscape. What do we have here? Who's speaking? And so and I'm so visual, so it helps me to just map it out. It could be really simple, like circles, lines, like it could be a small symbol of something that represents the part. It could just be a word like part that feels anxious or performer, uh, goofball part, um, sad part, or part that makes me do X, Y, and Z. So you're just noticing all of those different parts, and you could even kind of make it a flow chart too, like what flows into what. Like first I notice, feeling angry about something, or my partner does something and it makes me angry. So I notice angry part, and then I notice immediately after that, like a shameful part that comes in, or part that feels really guilty, or a part that worries that I'm like my mom, or a part that, you know, um, doesn't want me to be this way and wants to repair immediately. Um, so noticing the progression of what triggers
Right.
what, and then and just noticing that cycle, or yeah, how things flow. Uh, when because I also feel like whenever for almost every part, there's another part that is polarized with it or is in opposition to it, that believes something completely different, and most of the time has like a similar intention for the person, like wants them to be safe or wants them to be protected or wants them to be okay, but has a completely opposite view. And so that also feels helpful with maps, like noticing that and then noticing that, like when I say this word, or when I think about this experience or this situation, like, loading the dishwasher, and what comes up, and my partner has an idea of how that should be done, and I have an idea of how that should be done. And then noticing, like, as soon as you think about that, what comes up, and then as soon as you think about that, what comes up, and on you go. And you can just probably have an endless list of parts, or endless mapping of
Yeah.
noticing. Yeah.
I
So it'd be cool, like to, map out parts in that way, and then see how this, if we were like just gonna overlay that with the birth chart, like what's the overlap? Like, what am I
yeah.
noticing about each of these parts and each of these placements, and how they could be similar?
Yeah. That's it. I mean, my wheels are going. It's like, oh, what if we try this with the opposition thing? I'm curious if in your experience with your clients' parts or your parts, like do parts look like people in your life
They can.
ever? Okay.
I think that's a really good question to ask clients or ask yourself. And if it's a yes, then you just go with that, and
Hmm.
get curious about it and dig a little deeper. But if it's a no, then yeah, but yeah, sometimes parts are influenced by people in your life, right? Or influenced by a
Yeah.
parent. It could be a parent's voice, right? Or even a part of a parent's burden
Yeah.
that a client carries, or a part of us carries. Um, does that make sense? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I'm making some connections because I'm skeptical of everything I read and learn from every astrologer, even if I like really trust them. But there's some discussion about how if a planet is like directly opposite another planet, that tends to show up as like a pretty consistent relationship pattern in their life. Like maybe there's like a power dynamic that has this like energetic signature. And it
Mm,
pops up like with every teacher or every boss or every partner they have in their life. And it
uh-huh.
usually shows up in their birth chart as one of their like major oppositions. So like when a planet is like in degree in the opposite sign at the same degree, basically. For example, like an Aries planet, like a planet in Aries, opposite a planet in Libra. Those are directly opposite each other, that tends to look like that.
Oh,
So I'm curious if like a part that is responding to another part shows up in that person's life as like a consistent
interesting.
issue or dynamic.
Yeah.
Something
And
to, yeah, to keep
color.
in the back of my head while I'm listening to you talk about IFS.
Yeah, feels like balance is necessary, right?
Yeah,
And I balance in and of itself feels like it has its own intention for us and for for like the universe, right? To um
yeah,
yeah, influence and also keep, just keep things interesting, right?
yeah.
We
And
need the balance. And also I'm noticing, especially with my own parts and polarizations, it does feel like self is caught in the middle, right? And
yeah,
it's like, should I listen to this thing or should I listen to that thing? Do I listen to, it's like you're just choosing and picking which voice to listen to on any given day,
yeah,
which is exhausting and so hard, right? And so it isn't just like, yeah, which voice should I listen to today or which one's right? And I'm not the judge of which is right or wrong, right? It's like I want to listen to all of them, both of them,
yeah,
whatever, make sure they feel heard and understood. Like I hear the fears or the worries or the wants and the needs, and not necessarily the content of this is what I think you should do. That's what I think you should do, right? And
yeah,
stuck in that toggle that feels a little bit more like suffering, perhaps, than like freedom. And
yeah.
yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that it, in my experience, it felt like suffering, but now it feels like an understanding of moving. Like,
Mhm.
what is in motion stays in motion, kind of like that's healthy. And it you can, I've decided to release the exhaustion element and just understand that all things require care. It's balancing
Yeah.
how often you switch between what needs to be tended to. And I see this being connected to acknowledging and caring for my parts as well.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
hmm
Yeah. Listening. It's listening for the indicators like what part needs to be listened to right now.
hmm Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
I'm talking about the planets, but then I realized I was talking about IFS too. I was like, that's very cool.
Wow.
I just don't have my names or like colors and visuals for my parts yet, but I
Right.
have my glyphs, my planet glyphs on my birth chart that I'm thinking about when I say stuff like that.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the more that I think we get into this connection and this work, like I was saying, maybe speaking or just looking at our own charts and then seeing like what parts are coming up, like with each planet, with each house, and yeah,
Yeah.
what those actors are, and then oof, like how are they actors as parts or like actors in my life? And maybe there's multiple parts in each planet or each house, because I'm sure there are, right? Because there's so many.
Yeah.
Um, so I can't wait to kind of make my little parts map on my birth chart and
Yeah.
like
Do you
see.
do you use the word actors in IFS?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was like, oh, that's
But
cool.
like I definitely have an actor part.
Leo
And
Rising.
probably in my first house.
Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Oh, thank you. It's been absolutely delightful, and I can't wait to see where we go next.
Thank you for joining us for Parts and Charts, the IFS and Astrology podcast. If something sparked insight or resonated with you, we'd love to hear from you.
No, really, we're here to make friends. Reach out to us. Leave a comment, subscribe, and if you feel called, share this episode with someone you care about. Or if you want to work with us one-on-one and go deeper with this work, check the link in the show notes for how to find us.
Until next time, may all of you feel a part of the family.